Welcome to the Trevor Theismann Show. Today's topic is going to be for all you parents out there that are nervous about their kids starting to weightlift. I know as a parent and being through that whole process myself, when you start moving into the time period at which you transition into weights, sometimes it can be in the middle school or even high school, but there are a lot of inexperienced coaches and trainers out there that are possibly going to put your kid at a little bit of risk. So what I thought I'd do in this video is help you understand some things that maybe you should be watching for and some things that possibly you should be doing on the side to make your kids more ready for this experience. There's no doubt about it that weightlifting can be extremely beneficial and is extremely beneficial done in the right way. If you can strengthen your shoulders, strengthen your core, make your body more explosive, you'll throw a baseball harder. If you are looking to move to the next level as far as athletics is concerned in football, you're going to need more speed and agility, and oftentimes that is achieved by power training. That is how you can increase your speed, by becoming more explosive. So weight training, I would never consider it a negative, but done wrongly, it can be rather problematic for kids, building a terrible foundation of pain and tightness in areas that don't actually make them perform better. So if you, like me, are a little worried as your kids get a little bit older, I'd like to give you some tips on pieces of that journey that can help you along in understanding what to do. The first would be stunting growth. I know that was a worry when I was growing up, that was a big part of weightlifting was going to stunt everyone's growth. I think that as time has gone on, we've seen generations, 2 or 3 generations now of athletes have moved through. Weightlifting is not detrimental to any of their health. So can it do those types of things? Sure, if done incorrectly. But I'm not really seeing much in my experience at which we have this drastic stunting your growth in these children is really taking place. The one thing that I do see often is inexperience in coaches and trainers. You guys probably know you have some kind of a friend or someone that is a coach that never played sports a day in their life. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll tell you about how nervous they are about coaching a new team. Or I have one friend, for example, that coaches basketball, girls basketball, and has never coached a day in his life. Has no idea how to coach basketball and is learning as he goes. In a couple years, will he be a great, effective, wonderful coach? I think so. He definitely has good people skills. He's motivating and he's helping them learn the fundamentals, but he's learning as he goes as well. So when you are in that format or that time period when your kid moves into weightlifting, I think it would be safe for you to want to know how the weightlifting will go. You can always ask a coach. You can always ask whoever's in charge of this, let me see the weightlifting protocol. Let me see what you're going to be doing with the kids so that you, as a parent, can also work on those types of things, and it's movement specific. Anytime that you get under a barbell, there are a lot of things that can go wrong because your body wants to move the barbell and get it moving. It's as simple as that. If you're going to do a back squat, you're not thinking about form and mechanics to make the right muscle groups work that you actually want to strengthen. As a young athlete, I can remember whenever I did back squats, my knees would move in because I wasn't strong enough, and I would get a lot of leverage out of that internal knee position. Terrible for your knees, terrible for your back. But when you're young, all you're worried about is Johnny over there, or I don't mean to call out Johnny, but imagine there's other athletes that are doing more weight, and weight seems to always be one of the biggest factors when it comes to youth weightlifting. It's the ego thing. And as people get older, I shouldn't just say youth. It's really everyone in general. Weightlifting is an ego-driven sport, and anytime that you get in the weight room, you cannot help but compare yourself. But the key is, for a youth athlete, I think you got to spend some time working with your young athlete on fundamental movements so that they don't hurt themselves. When you get this workout regimen from your coach, I don't think it's not going to be in your best interest to tell them they don't know what they're doing. Of course, that's not what you're going to do. But if you learn that they're going to be maxing out every 4 to 6 weeks and they're doing 1 rep maxes, then it is imperative that you understand squat form, power clean form, any of the lifts that they are doing, and you help your kid with repetitions on super light weight to get the movements down properly. If you're not spending any time with your kid and he's doing 1 rep maxes every 4 to 6 weeks, that is very, very stressful on the body. I would assume that most coaches are not making them do that every 6 weeks. That's probably an exaggeration. You got to hope it's on a 12-week cycle or something of that nature, maybe even 8-week. But a 1 rep max can be oftentimes an indication of, in youth athletes, I'm talking middle school and early, this first transition period, a 1 rep max is extremely dangerous for a young athlete and completely unnecessary, really. It's always a good format to be able to find out how strong someone is, but oftentimes the mechanics involved in giving your 1 rep max are horrendous. So if your coach is giving you their workout sheet and you're seeing that they're going to be doing 5 rep max outs or even 8 rep max outs, then you're probably in a little better off than some people. You know, if you're moving into a system where it's 1 rep maxes, that should be a bit of a red flag where you need to become more involved. If you're seeing 5 rep maxes, 8 rep maxes, then at least we're looking out for the health of our young athletes a little bit more conservatively. Not saying that 1 rep maxes are all bad. It's an excellent gauge of power and explosiveness and strength. But if you have an inexperienced athlete, that is not going to help the cause whatsoever. It's kind of almost a waste of time, in my opinion. They'd be much better off not getting the extra soreness, not getting all the tears and things throughout the muscle to, ruin their training modality or their training regimen to come. If you've ever done a 1 rep max and you do it truly all out, you're going to feel that for the next week. And what does that do to my future workouts? What does that do to my future progression? That's something that you really want to try to be sure that you're being involved in. So check the sheet, understand what they're doing, and help them with mechanics. I think YouTube is one of course, everyone's familiar with YouTube, but it can be a really effective tool to learn general fundamental movements. So find yourself a good power lifter. Find yourself a squat max perfectionist. Find someone that can do bench press with the most perfect form and analyze their movements. Understand where their elbows are. Understand where they're driving from. Understand their shoulder blade position when doing bench press. When you're doing power cleans, where do they get their leverage? Do they get them with a high elbow? Is a lot of pressure in their back? Do they drop down in their hips? All these little movements are going to help not only your young athlete be able to lift more weight and get that ego pat on the back that they're looking for, but it'll keep them safe and effectively increase their performance. I think that weightlifting has been a major part of my life when it comes to athletics. My goal always was to play professional baseball. Of course, not everybody gets to play professional baseball, which I didn't learn for a really long time. But what I did get obsessed with was trying to increase my own personal performance. Genetics play a far greater role in this professional athlete world than I think most people really want to swallow. As a young athlete, you've always been told you're going to be able to achieve whatever it is you set your mind to. And I wouldn't want to change that advice for young athletes. I mean, I drove through life with determination and grit, always working as hard as I possibly could to get me where I am today, whether it was in the athletic games that I was playing in, whether it was training to be better, whether it was in business, whether it was in schooling, all of those things. It's a good fundamental thing to have, that you're always trying to drive your children to be the best that they can be. But when it comes to learning these mechanics, as I said, get on YouTube and find experts in a given movement. And the more that you as a parent can get more familiar with these types of movements, you're going to be able to help your kid do these types of exercises. If you've got some serious athletes or someone on the bubble, there really is a lot of equipment that you can buy now at home that you can do a lot of these exercises. Squat racks are $500 or less. You might want to get into that if your kid is getting into athletics in high school and they're having to do back squat all the time. They need to practice the movement. It's a pretty good investment if you think your kid's going to be in these weightlifting classes for the next 4 to 6 years to practice some of these movements. A squat rack will also get you into the bench press area, get you a barbell, get some of those things that you're going to be doing in school so that you can practice the movements. Without practicing them, you're never going to get any better. And most often, it takes a lot more repetitions than they're going to get in school anyway. I think one of the toughest parts that I always found moving through athletics was the weightlifting and the blend between the lifting and the actual coaching and training for the sport in some schools is very difficult to juggle. You know that you've got a weightlifting schedule. We've got to get X amount of lifts in a certain amount of time. We've got 10 days where we can actually coach the team before our, whatever it may be, before season begins. Not a lot of oversight. Get in here, guys. Do your weightlifting, and then we're going to head out to practice. And in some situations, they're not even allowed to help in those. So I think there's a little bit of hands-on aspect that parents should be really getting involved in with these exercises to make sure that you keep your kids safe and to also be sure that they're getting the right recommendations moving forward. And I think you should be very involved in their max outs as well. If they're doing 5 or 8 rep max outs, all schools are going to do this. I've never been around one coach that isn't going to do some kind of a max out. And it's good for your ego and it's good for moving forward. If you don't ever increase weight, then you know that the kids either aren't working hard enough, they're not working the right muscles, or they're just not getting the proper nutrition they need. So these types of things are a great indication to know whether or not it's going to be an effective protocol that they're using. So get involved in that step-by-step process. Is your kid actually increasing the amount of weight that they can do? Are they increasing it with proper form? There's going to be times in the season where you may not have access to the gym. There may be some off time in the winter. There might be time periods like that where if you were working with your young athlete, understanding those movements, we don't need to lift heavy when we're working with them, but we can always practice form. We could always practice that element of it to where when they get back to competition and they're working hard in the weight room, that they're going to be even safer. I would also strongly recommend that you're not going to be able to do a ton of heavy lifting on your own because you don't want to overtrain these athletes. There's only so much time in the day. And I think there's a big wave right now of youth athletics really overstepping where they should be. If you are doing practice and games 12 months out of the year, driving your kid into the ground, you kill all the fun of it for them. So there's a bit of a balance on what you can do with them. And let's be honest, most adults need to be getting in better shape anyway. So doing types of exercises with them outside of these heavy workout regimens. Let me give you an example. In the summertime, football really heats up. So all of your football athletes are going to be doing summer weightlifting. They're all going to be doing 2-a-day style practices, most likely. Maybe not 2-a-days in the heat of the summer. But in that format, you're not going to have a whole lot of time to work with these athletes because they're already strenuous. They've got a big workload that they're already dealing with. So at this time period, you want to be a little bit more hands-off, but stay involved in a sense. You want to understand what they're doing. But what I would suggest is getting on a bit of a workout regimen that you can even do with your kids. It's fun to hang out with them and work on their form, but you should be doing things like shoulder stability with them. 5-pound dumbbells, doing jobs, doing rotator cuff work to keep their shoulders strong. In this example of football, your rotator cuff is very important for when you're tackling not to have some kind of a separation or tear. You need strength in your shoulders to prevent injury. Now, you can get that from powerlifting, but oftentimes that stability side of stuff is where the ball is dropped. So when you're working out with your kids or doing things on the side, it would be very beneficial for them if you started working in some kind of a format that is more of a rehabilitation protocol. You're not maxing out on the bench. You're maybe doing lightweight bench with slow resisted declines with perfect form. We're still getting practice in the movements, so they're always progressing in that given lift. But we're not loading up the weight to force unneeded overload, if that makes sense. So being able to work jobs and 5-pound dumbbell work for stability muscles, working core training, lots of side bridges, front bridges, rotational movements of stability. Stability ball work, bringing your knees in with your feet on top of the ball. That's a really great exercise for any youth athlete. Upper body strength, hold your weight up. Put your hands on the floor, put your feet on a stability ball, do circles with it, go in and out with it. It's a very simple exercise that even adults could benefit from, but those types of exercises are what I'm referring to. So if you could create like a 30-minute workout, that you would be able to do in an off-season format with your young athlete. Maybe you just do it on Saturday mornings, but you're building the fundamentals of rehabilitation style exercises in their training and also working on the movements at which they're going to be tested out with later. Most of the time, your advanced level athletes in a high school or middle school format that have the highest potential of weight reps. So say their max out is double what it is of your young athlete. Oftentimes that gap is not near as big if they simply practice the movement. You've got that mind-body connection that if you can help your young athlete get sooner, then they will progress much faster. If they're not good at a bench press motion, then you should practice. If you practice that movement and understand how to get leverage out of your chest, your weight is going to go up dramatically. You're going to improve their confidence. You're going to improve their ego. You're going to improve all of the pieces that's going to make them compete at a higher level. But if you don't get involved in that and all they're getting to do is the weightlifting 2 to 3 times, maybe 4 times a week, but they're only doing bench press once a week and their bench press is a brutal weight, those kinds of things can go a long way. I think some of the Olympic lifts too, that is a very difficult lift for most people that don't have good core strength. So building your core up is going to help in these Olympic style lifts as well. But if your young athlete has terrible balance and terrible flexibility, they are not going to be very good at the power clean. They're not going to be very good at the deadlift because when they deadlift, their back's going to hurt. So are you stretching their hips, stretching their hamstrings, looking up videos and things that you can help them with? That's highly recommended. You've got to make sure that you've got a good functioning athlete to where they can benefit from this transition into weights. And as they move through that progression, you should stay with them in that rehabilitation style format, working shoulder stability, working your core, and movements like that. I think the fundamentals of building core strength and shoulder stability as well as glutes and hips can be a big factor when it comes to performance. And let me explain. When I was growing up, Olympic lifts was the staple. That was what we were always tested on, and that is basically what the foundation of our workouts were always involved with. If you find yourself in a school where that's also the fundamentals, then this after-school type of working out is going to be essential. Now, there's also a lot of cutting-edge coaches that do a really great job of mixing that in, but time is everyone's enemy. If you're only able to work with an athlete so much, you have to make sure that you're getting the fundamentals of the sport in addition to the conditioning. So if you're only able to work out 3 times a week and then you have your football practice, baseball practice, soccer practice, working on the fundamentals, the skills, shooting, ball handling, all those types of things, then conditioning is most likely going to take a back seat. And if that's the case, this is where you should be ready to step in. I've made a bunch of different workouts and things that you can always utilize in the training blog on kbandstraining.com, but there's a lot of great trainers out there that you can utilize for specifics. Olympic lifts is one that I would definitely point to. There are a lot of great trainers out there teaching Olympic lifts that were competing in the Olympics. Having the ability and access to those, I mean, to tell you, I think that's one of the coolest things about YouTube and this kind of format, that as time goes on, the average Joe really does have access to the highest level of information available. And you should take full advantage of that. If your athlete wants to play a sport, then you should understand what it takes to get to the next level and help them on the way rather than just taking a back seat and worrying that they're going to get hurt. There are things that you can do. Now, hiring trainers. The one thing that I would say, just as if you're hiring a trainer, make sure that they are highly recommended and you see some results. I've worked with or overseen an awful lot of trainers and coaches that are very inexperienced, and I'm sure all of you can relate. They don't seem to know exactly what they're doing. They seem to be following the lead of other coaches. They seem to be not exactly understanding the movements, and they may even not be interested whatsoever and just have a job. So as parents, I think that is a big part of how we need to get more ingrained on helping our kids get to the next level while not overtraining them, but helping them in those small pieces that you can. The stability aspect, the shoulder training, the core work, and the legs. Another element that is imperative is flexibility. It is not much fun to stretch and it is not much fun to do all those types of things on the side. But I will say, when I went through sports, that was the thing that got the farthest backseat. You had sport-specific exercises, you would learn your ball handling and so on and so forth, and then it would be conditioning, and then the flexibility was kind of always this 2 or 3 minute thing at the end or at the beginning, right? And I'm sure you guys can relate. You've seen your kid out there and they rarely stretch. It's a slight little warm-up, maybe a dynamic warm-up where they're moving and getting a little sweat before the workout itself, but there's a lot of tightness that's involved when you're doing weight training and when you're working out. I think that if you can spend some time with your athlete, not only doing the exercises I've already suggested, but getting on a good stretch routine. It doesn't have to be this long format yoga workout, but if you're working out with your kid once a week and doing some of these types of buffer style exercises, you should be moving into a stretch routine with a resistance band or something to assist for hamstring flexibility, glutes, hips, shoulders, the works. You don't want to leave anything out really, but the hamstrings and glutes I feel like are some of the most important muscles that always get too tight. If you let these muscles get too tight, it affects the way that your whole entire body operates because your back tenses up to, alleviate some of that tension that's in your hamstring. Your back will take more of the load. Once your back goes, good luck in rotational sports. Good luck in contact sports. You want to make sure that everything is functioning properly. So I guess my final words on your anxiety or worry that your young athlete is moving into weight training is get a good idea of, say, a workout day that you would do with your child that's going to incorporate flexibility, shoulder stability, and core strength. And that will be your workout and the fundamentals of what you will make sure that you're helping your child with on their journey. Step 2 is understanding what it is that they're doing in the weight room and maintaining proper form during those exercises. If form is not an essential piece of what you're coaching your kid to do, if you are only worried about how much they bench press and you've got to get that number up, then you're doing them a disservice. You are their parent and you have to help them progress, but you have to keep them safe. And that proper form is actually going to make them progress way farther exponentially down the road. Let me give you an example. Bench press is always one of the easiest ones because that is the epitome of athleticism and strength in most people's eyes at a young age, because ego is the only thing that they're worried about. How good can I look in the weight room? If I could do more weight than everybody else, then I'm in a good place. But if you can teach your kid at a very, very young age, starting out, what proper mechanics are, then when they get to the format at which ego is a big factor in the weight room, then they're going to be getting much better results because they're pushing in the right way. With that mind-body connection, if my mind can tell my chest to lift a weight and I'm not bench pressing with my shoulder and triceps, I'm going to be able to do far greater weight than if I've had piss poor form from the beginning using my triceps and shoulders to get the weight. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are bad at bench press and you are a tricep shoulder presser, you will be able to do far more weight than someone that is not doing or that is moved back to the form. And what I mean by that is I was like that. I was always bench pressing with my shoulders and my triceps because our coaches wanted more weight, and that was the only way that I could get progress, was to find leverage in joints that would just give it to me. But when I took a step back to learn how to bench press with my chest, my weight went down probably nearly 30%. That is an enormous ego crusher when you're at an age that cannot take a reduction in the weight. So teach them the fundamentals early, practice the movements at home, and help them accelerate for that later on time period when they're going to want their ego to be more of a player in what they're doing. Because let me tell you, when you get to a junior and a senior in high school, they're not going to be real interested in doing less weight. They don't want to move down and take a step back towards all their competition in their classes. They want to be moving up. But if you catch them when they're in 8th and 9th grade how to do that movement, they're already not lifting more weight than the strongest individuals. So practice, practice, practice. Great movements, great fundamentals, and you're going to see better results. Well, that'll wrap it up for today's episode. Let me know in the comments if you have any other topics you want me to cover. I've got a whole bunch of stuff spinning around up here, so I hope to talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.